The loudest advice in the Instagram space right now is don't niche down. You are the niche. Build everything around you. And honestly, it's complete bullshit. And it's not just me, because the head of Instagram literally just admitted something in a podcast that most people in the space completely miss. And once you hear it, everything I'm about to show you will make sense. But here's the thing. Before you think you're safe because you are niche down, you're probably not. At least not in the way that actually matters, because a lot of people niche down the wrong thing, which confuses the algorithm as well as your audience. So let me show you what you're actually training the algorithm to do every single time you post, because you can actually do everything right and still end up with an audience that doesn't care and that'll never buy a single thing from you. So here's an example from one of my clients. He had actually a decent amount of views and reach beforehand, roughly 40,000 followers, and he wanted to launch a product because everyone told him, look at your audience. With your audience and with your numbers, it's a no-brainer. You're gonna get rich. So that's what he did. And here are his sales. 2. Yes, you heard that right, 2 sales. And it wasn't actually the product was bad or anything wrong with its content. The major problem was exactly this. His content spent years training the algorithm wrong signals, attracting a seemingly right crowd on the surface level, but actually the totally wrong audience that did not care. Now, on the other hand, here's a reel that I made right here. Almost 13,000 views, not even. Looks very horrible from the outside, but it made me $19,000 directly from it because guess what? I am niche down in a certain way. So let me show you how that actually works. Now, here's one thing that took me way long to figure out. The algorithm is way dumber than you think. And I don't mean that as an insult. Well, but I mean it literally, right? Because it changes the way how you should make content. Mosseri, the head of Instagram, said something a few weeks ago in a podcast on how the algorithm is actually different than most people think.
When we talk about does the algorithm know something, usually we think in these more semantic terms. It knows I like surfing. And it's like, it doesn't. It just has this big ass number that happens to correlate with surfing.
So essentially what that means is the algorithm has no real context for what you actually do. Dumb robot, basically. So what does that actually mean for you? Well, it basically means that the only thing that teaches the algorithm about your content is the people that react to it, the people that engage with it. And if that crowd is a wide range of people, basically a broad mix, all those signals just cancel each other out. And the algorithm basically has nothing consistent left to learn from and take away from it, which is exactly why niching down the wrong things makes your reach feel random. And there are 2 ways people get this wrong usually. And this is the first and most common one. Go into broad. Now, by too broad, I actually don't mean posting broad memes or reposting stuff or chasing viral clips. Don't do that either, right? Please, it'll wreck your account. But what I mean with too broad is that the actual focus of your content is just off just one notch, basically. So without getting too abstract right here, here's an example. Let's say you're a financial advisor for freelancers. Real example for my clients, by the way. You help freelancers get to $10,000 a month consistently. And then you do what basically everyone tells you to. You assume the algorithm is smart and you assume the algorithm knows who your audience actually is and who you want to target. So you take a look at some top performing reels in your industry and you find something like this: 3 daily habits to become a millionaire. And you're like, that is awesome. I'm going to do that. Right? Broad, very broad, gets lots of views, but it's still in your niche. Right? So pretty good. You post it and suddenly you get a lot of views, 200,000 views, maybe 1 million views. Real example, by the way, this one blew up, the first video that actually blew up, and it looks great from the outside and it really feels good from the outside. But underneath it is actually a completely mixed crowd of people, still sort of in your niche. We'll talk about this in a second. But people that have nothing to do with what you actually want to achieve with your content. In his case, this video might actually attract people like students or people with normal jobs who will never even think about freelancing, who don't even know what that is, or retired people who just want to get their money affairs in order and just, live freely and stuff like this. The only people he didn't attract are the people that he should have attracted, which is freelancers. And this is why this is really dangerous, because on paper, this whole thing still looks like you're niching down and you're probably getting more views even because of this initially. Yet everything downstream crumbles. So emails, the leads that you get, sales, brand deal opportunities, whatever it is that you want, they just don't really come in as you should. And then you look at your account and be like, on paper, I'm doing really everything right, yet nothing is moving, right? Everything feels random, which is why I created an AI tool, totally free, by the way, that takes a look at your content and your account from the outside and tells you whether you're aligned or whether your whole profile is just misaligned with what you're trying to do, right? So basically, just put the handle in, let it run. It tells you basically what's up. Link is in the description, again, totally for free. So here's the part that actually might confuse you even more, because whenever I tell them to not go broad, they're like, well, but here's what's up. Broad people, the big creators in my space, they do that. For example, what I get all the time, Hormozy does this. But here's the thing, these rules actually don't apply to big accounts in your space because they already have a big name. And they can't actually post that because they've got years worth of data and signals already telling the algorithm exactly who they're for and basically the context of it. So a broad post rides on top of that context, and the algorithm doesn't need to dilute it with just very broad people because it's still trying to figure out what's up. The problem is, most likely you don't have that yet. So for you, the broad post doesn't ride on your positioning. It actually becomes your positioning. The Instagram algorithm just goes, well, I understand now. Broad people from all different backgrounds react to it. So I understand what this account is for. Industry-wide finance stuff, for example. And every post that you post afterwards goes out to, first of all, that same crowd, that broad crowd. A crowd where almost nobody needs a financial advisor for freelancers in this case, or whatever that is for you. So here's the important part that becomes even more dangerous if you do it the wrong way. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people, a lot of clients this year actually, because people hear this and they go, well, Dominic, of course, I get it. Going broad is bad. I've heard this a million times. So let me go really narrow. So they zoom all the way in and they niche down as hard as they possibly can. Lots of AI actually talks about this, because they say, well, I want to reach exactly the one person with one very narrow problem. And it makes sense, especially in paper. Also, if AI, ChatGPT, or Claude tells you that, but it doesn't work either. And then you'll have no views for a very long time. So if broad doesn't work and narrow doesn't work either, what's left, man? Well, honestly, this is exactly the part that took me way too long to figure out. Because instead of taking a look at your niche from a top-down view and trying to go broad within your niche, your industry, basically, you actually zoom in first to pick your people, the ones you want to reach, the ones that get you to your goals. In this case, freelancers who want to hit 10K. And then you zoom back out again and you get as broad as you possibly can inside that room. Because it turns out, looking at it from this angle, you can go really broad without niching down too much. Stuff, for example, in this freelancer thing about how much to charge, tax problems, rebates, infrastructures, packaging, stuff like this. All pretty broad things, and actually a lot of content I could talk about, yet every single piece of that pulls in the same crowd if you package it the right way. And that's the whole thing. So basically flip this whole thing. Go narrow, talking about who it's for, and go broad on what you talk about. Like I said, most of the people do it the other way around. They go broad on who, narrow on what, basically posting the same 3 broad topics to everyone, and then nothing works. Now, if you remember the guy from the beginning, the one with 40,000 followers and nothing worked, that's exactly what he was doing wrong, because he had an audience problem, basically a diluted audience, which looked good on paper. The whole strategy looked perfectly, even with some of the views, and he did everything right, but it still didn't work because nobody told him the thing that I just showed you. And a few months later, after fixing all these things, he got a lot more than 2 sales and also surpassed his followers that he's had before. I do this all day long in my mentorship, by the way. So if you feel like you've got something people would actually pay for or be interested in, but it just doesn't flow, or you don't have a clear roadmap on how it works for your situation, you can actually book a call with my long-term business partner, Florian. Tell him what you got and tell him what your goals are. And then you guys are going to take a look at whether we can actually help you hands-on, right? It's an actual hands-on mentorship where I'm pretty involved. Sometimes we're full, so don't be alarmed if the calendar or the application form is down. Just wait until the calendar is back up again. So link is down in the description. All right, so with that out of the way, how do you actually pick that room in a way that makes the algorithm and people be like, damn, I just need to follow this person. I need to buy their stuff. I need to send them chocolate with a bit of poison in it. So first of all, if you have people that you already work with, customers, clients, take exactly those people that pay you already and write down the 3 biggest problems that these people actually have. Just the 3 biggest problems. If you don't have anybody that works with you yet, just assume these 3 big problems, do a bit of research. You're going to figure this out. I'm sure you're smart. But for example, for financial advisors, that might be something like, I don't know what to charge. Or my income is different every month and I'm terrified of taxes. And from now on, every single piece of content that you make has to relate back to one of them. Not 2, not 3, 1 piece of content, 1 problem. That is it. Because otherwise you end up diluting this whole thing up again. So step 2, before you post anything, always run it through these 2 questions. First of all, which one of my 3 problems does this piece of content hit? If you can't answer that in one sentence, don't post your reel or carousel. Go back to the drawing board, to the scripting stage. And the second question is, and people usually forget that, who does this actually exclude? So are there people that would feel repelled by watching your reel? If no, also bad. It should repel at least somebody, because great content should be ideally slightly boring for everybody outside of your room. That's actually the whole point of niching down the right way. So that is the outside view. It's important, but there's also a number inside your own analytics that tells you that in a very similar way, and it helps you figure this out way better. And it's shares. And I know shares, yeah, people have been going crazy about shares for years now. And it's kind of become one of those things that everyone just repeats without really explaining why. But Mosseri, the head of Instagram, he keeps coming back to the whole shares topic. And the way he actually splits this whole thing is really interesting, because he's like, yeah, likes, not really important, but important for the people that already follow you. And shares matter way more for the people that don't. He keeps repeating this exact same sentence. So I was like, interesting. So I went ahead and looked at exactly the whole share rate across my clients' accounts, and basically looked at which content actually gets more shares and which content makes people more money. And here's the interesting thing. It wasn't the polished, super polished stuff. Sometimes it was, not always. It wasn't even the best hooks, to be honest, because people obsess over hooks. Nah, the stuff that got shared the most and got the most target views basically had something in it that people hadn't seen before in some shape or form, which makes sense because you probably don't want to share something that you know the other person already knows. So if we break it down, the things that got shared the most was content that felt uniquely valuable or novel in some shape or form. Now, before you start to panic because you're like, well, novel, I got to invent 100 new things, figure out all these crazy things nobody's ever said. Well, I took a look at that as well, and you don't. Underneath all this novel content we tracked is still 90% proven content, same topics, same structures, validated. And just 10% are basically the unique things that people love, apparently. So at the end of the day, it's actually not that hard, because it's just more like saying the same thing in a slightly different way from everyone else. Which brings me to word, and something that I think everyone here gets wrong. And honestly, you might have gotten it wrong from watching my videos too. We're talking about the word viral. And you probably hear viral and think of, well, I need millions of views. It means tens of millions of views. Basically, make videos as broad as they can get. But that's not what we're talking about. Even not here on this channel, at least not for the past 2 years. Because for me and for you, viral should actually mean viral inside your room. I've actually got multiple clients making 6 figures from a few thousand views per reel on average. For example, I have one client, he's averaging 4,000 to 7,000 views. Of course, there's some outliers here and there, but he just recently launched a group program, a cohort basically, and he made $28,000 the first time he launched it. There you go. Conversely, if something goes really viral in your room, that's when it can go really crazy. Even honestly, a little bit stupid. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it unless you have the capacity for lots of things, because I once had a reel, for example, get over 300,000 views, still not brought viral, but still viral within my room. This one right here, and while it was not 300,000 of the right views, let's say 180,000 of these 300,000 were really the right views. And the whole thing clocked my calendar for months. We had to actually shut down the mentorship for 2 months because we just couldn't take in more people. And the reel actually made $126,000, lifetime, obviously. Now, obviously, here's the honest caveat about this, because once you start to really nail your messaging and build your room the right way, your reach is initially going to dip. I have to tell you that. So it's not going to be like all easy from the start. And most people really make the mistake of giving up too early and basically going back to the old ways once they see this initial dip for a while. But this dip in reality is just your old broad sort of crowd not really reacting to content that isn't really for them anymore. So become the architect basically and map out your room. If you want to grow as broad as possible and you just want to be famous, awesome, cool, right? But then none of it applies to you right here. But if your content actually has a job to do and you want to change basically your life, your business, your income with your content, that thing is the only play going forward. Now, here's the unfortunate thing. Because if finding your room is kind of the easy part once you know what to do, the hard part is actually finding angles and content ideas that always feel unique and novel. So watch this video next while I walk you through a whole system to mine novel angles and ideas to feed this whole content machine.